His Holiness, the former representative of His Holiness, distinguished guests, and friends. There's not a lot left to say, and I also feel a bit of a fraud because most of you have been marching and have been at Westminster and outside the Chinese embassy, whereas I just get to come along for the momos and to say a few words at the end. But as I've said before, my very first demonstration as a spotty teenager was outside the Chinese embassy with those from the Tibetan movement back in the 1970s. So I have done it quite a lot before, but well done everybody. And can I also pay tribute to John? John's going to be a big loss when he goes to Brazil, of all places. But I look forward to seeing a very large pro-Tibetan movement emerge in the Latin American continent in due course. John has helped the all-party group enormously over the years, and I was in Parliament for 27 years, and one of my proudest achievements, if I had any, was my links with the Tibetan community and being able to get up in Parliament, often as a lone voice some years ago, to put forward the case of the outrageous acts that were going on in Tibet and against the Tibetan people by the Chinese regime. We got more and more friends as the years went on. As John's just said as well, the movement that's thrown the spotlight on what the Chinese government had been up to since the 1950s in Tibet, and now against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, in Hong Kong, against Mongolians and others, have now become headlines across the world. So we are making progress, but there is so much more to do. And so it's so important that we come together on March the 10th to commemorate those very brave men and women in Lhasa who rose up against the oppression of the Chinese Communist Party government and the Red Army back in 1959, which led to the flight of His Holiness. We should never forget the bravery of those back in 1959 and those who have sought to stand up against oppression ever since, both inside Tibet and outside of Tibet as well. It's a great honour to be invited here today. It was a great honour to be invited to help celebrate Losar with you just over a week ago, and I was very touched to be presented with a photograph from His Holiness as well, which already has a pride of place in my house. We should also, as has been touched on, mention the great challenges that people in Tibet have had now with the natural disasters, with the earthquake in the new year, and the worry for many families who still don't know exactly the extent of the damage and of the victims. Now, one of the advantages of not being a Member of Parliament anymore is, firstly, I can come off my blood pressure pills, but also I can go travelling a bit. And I spent last November in the Himalayas. I took 4 weeks out and we went to Nepal and we went to the wonderful country of Bhutan. We went to Darjeeling and we went to Sikkim. We went right up north in India, as close as we could get to the China border without going over it, because I am still sanctioned by the China government. And that is still a badge of honour. So even though I'm not a Member of Parliament, I'm still sanctioned by the Chinese government, and I will use that to continue to rally people against the oppression that the Chinese government weigh on. But in my travels, we met many people from Tibet and many people with close links to Tibet, and it was greatly moving to see the struggles they've had. We went to the Women's Refugee Centre in Darjeeling, people who had come soon after 1959 and made their lives in that part of India. These are very worrying times, as everybody has said. The conflict in Ukraine has diverted the world's attention from some of the atrocities that still go on day in, day out, inside Tibet, against the Uyghurs, against freedom and liberty in Hong Kong, the trial, the sham trial of Jimmy Lai that is going on now, the spy centre which they want to build opposite the Tower of London, and I shall be at the rally again on Saturday to protest against that. And the Chinese government just don't get it, because there was a very large number of people who turned up to protest that this was not the appropriate place for the Chinese embassy, and in future there would be not enough room for people to come and demonstrate. So what did they do? They sent along a load of pro-Chinese demonstrators to demonstrate against the demonstrators, to show there was even less room to have demonstrations by those who wanted to go and demonstrate in the future. So I hope they come again, because they were very much in the minority. And I was in Sarajevo last autumn with the National Uyghur Congress, and I saw some of the death threats that have been issued against many of the members who bravely went to Sarajevo to fight their cause there as well. We have just seen the monstrosity of 40 Uyghurs being deported from Thailand back to face an uncertain future in China. There was no reason for that. Many countries offered to give them refuge, but they were sent to China because China intimidates and bullies countries and governments and local authorities across the world. And of course we've had the recent further spy scandals within Parliament itself. So the tentacles of the Chinese Communist Party are everywhere, remain everywhere, but people are at last waking up to the threat that they pose to the security and safety of not just oppressed peoples from within China and outside China, but also other communities as well. So let me finish by echoing those comments that have been made by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. A beacon of compassion and hope, and a symbol of kindness and peace, which sums up the fight of the Tibetan people. Because as I've always said, the fight of the Tibetan people is not just the fight for Tibet, but it is the fight of all just people for freedom and liberty and fairness across the whole world, which is why your cause is so important, and it is my cause, and it's the cause of Chris Law, who we've now been joined with, who's taken on the mantle of the all-party group, I'm delighted to say as well. I have never met a more resilient group of people than the Tibetan communities across the world that I've had the honour to come across. It's been a great honour for me to be able to stand up for the Tibetan people inside Parliament, but just because I've retired from Parliament doesn't mean I'm going to give up the cause, and I will continue to fight for the cause of the Tibet and the Tibet people from outside Parliament as well. So I'll see you on the demonstration next Saturday. I'll see you on as many demonstrations as it's going to take, and we will continue to fight for the cause that those brave men and women highlighted back in 1959, 66 years ago. A cause that is important to all of us today as it was 66 years ago. Thank you again for inviting me.